The 5 Krellians were screaming, but the human's heart rate hadn't even broken 80. Beneath the flickering emergency strobes of Crucible SciFi, the air smelled of scorched insulation and the metallic tang of fresh blood. Cadet Maya Torres remained kneeling in the center of the kill zone, her hands clamped firmly over the arterial spray painting her gray fatigues. Around her, 4-armed warriors lay in heaps of tangled limbs and shattered chitin, their dominant swagger replaced by the ragged sounds of shock. The automated turrets hissed as they swiveled, searching for a target that Maya had already neutralized with clinical, terrifying precision. Pressure still maintained, Maya reported, her voice cutting through the alarms with the flatness of a dial tone. Some things look fragile because they've never needed armor. You'll want to hear why. The arrival of the 12 humans at Golgotha Station 3 weeks earlier had been a quiet affair. They stepped off the shuttle looking soft, their skin a pale, vulnerable pink against the harsh obsidian backdrop of Sentinel Prime. Instructor Ralph Viven watched them from the observation deck, his mandible tightening as he checked their files. They lacked the Thorin's natural plating and the Krellian's sheer muscular density. To Viven, they looked like biological errors, a prey species sent to a predator's forge. Maya Torres stood at the back of the group, her oversized brown eyes not tracing the architecture of the station, but cataloging every exit and structural weakness. Federation doctrine was built on the law of biological tiers. The Krellians, led by a massive 4-armed cadet named Zor, sat at the apex. They were the primary shock troops bred for a universe that demanded violence. At the bottom were the support species like the Thorins, valued only for their ability to process data or repair machines. Vec, a spindly Thorin with trembling secondary digits, had been Zor's favorite target since orientation. That distinctive Krellian chittering sound that passes for laughter echoed through the mess hall daily. It was a phonetic signature of dominance, a jagged noise that signaled a coming bruise. Viven observed it all, recording the data for the High Command. He watched Zor knock Vec's tray to the floor. The Krellian's 4 arms flared in a threat display that made the surrounding cadets shrink back. Maya Torres sat 3 tables away, slowly peeling an orange. She didn't look up, but her fingers moved with a rhythmic, mechanical steadiness that Viven found odd. "You are a mistake," Zor had chittered, leaning over Maya's table. "A soft, skin-wrapped mistake." Maya finally looked up. She didn't flinch. She didn't even stop her task. She simply checked her watch, noted the time, and went back to her fruit. Viven noted the interaction in his logs. Human subject 742 Torres displays high levels of passive avoidance, likely survival instinct of a low-tier organism. The Crucible SciFi was supposed to be a routine pressure test. The chamber was configured to replicate a heavy-gravity industrial world, complete with crushing atmospheric density and automated security drones. The goal was simple: reach the extraction point as a cohesive unit. Viven watched from the control booth as the cadets entered. He saw the humans moving in a tight formation, their movements strangely synchronized. Zor and his pack took the lead, pushing the weaker species to the rear to serve as bait for the drones. The simulation turned lethal at the 3-kilometer mark. A localized power surge, likely caused by the planet's volatile magnetic field, fried the safety regulators. The yellow caution lights snapped into a violent, pulsing red. The drones, usually set to stun, began chambering live kinetic rounds. "System failure," Viven whispered, his fingers flying across the override console. "All units abort." But the locks had already engaged. SciFi was a tomb. In the chaos, Vec stumbled. The Thorin's gate was never meant for high-pressure environments. A drone swiveled, its optics glowing a murderous crimson, and fired. The kinetic slug tore through Vec's shoulder, sending him spiraling into the grid of the chamber floor. The Krellian laughter started immediately, a reflexive response to perceived weakness. Zor didn't stop. He stepped over the bleeding Thorin, leading his pack toward the far bulkhead. "The strong survive," Zor shouted over the roar of the atmospheric vents. "The slow bleed out." Maya Torres was already moving. She didn't run, she flowed. She dropped into a low, efficient crouch that minimized her profile, sliding through the line of fire as slugs sparked against the obsidian floor. She reached Vec and began a rhythmic sequence of movements. Viven watched his monitors, his breath hitching. Maya wasn't screaming. She wasn't praying. She was adjusting the strap on her medical kit with a calm that felt inhuman. "I need a second pair of hands," Maya called out, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. Zor paused at the bulkhead, his 4 arms crossed. He chittered, the sound mocking and cruel. "Why waste effort on a broken tool, little human? Save yourself if you can." Maya didn't ask a second time. She turned her attention back to Vec, her hands moving in a blur of clinical trauma care. She used a specialized hemostatic gauze, packing the wound while simultaneously checking Vec's pulse. Her vitals, displayed on Viven's master screen, remained flat. Her heart rate was 78 beats per minute. The drones intensified their assault. A secondary cascade triggered the heavy industrial fans, whipping the dust into a blinding storm. Zor, realizing the exit was still locked, turned back toward the center of the room. He seemed frustrated, his ego bruised by the failure of the simulation he was supposed to dominate. He marched toward Maya, his armor flares extending in an aggressive display. "Move," Zor commanded. "You're blocking the path to the manual override." "He's unstable," Maya said, her eyes fixed on Vec's pale face. "Help me move him or stay back." Zor lunged. He intended to toss the small human aside like a piece of refuse. It was a move he had practiced 1,000 times on 100 different species. Maya Torres issued a final warning: don't. The collision happened in the space of a heartbeat. As Zor's upper right hand reached for her collar, Maya didn't retreat. She stepped into his center of gravity. She used a rotational joint lock that turned the Krellian's own massive strength against his skeletal structure. A sickening pop echoed through the chamber, the sound of a multi-jointed limb being forced past its limit. The Krellian pack froze. Their leader was doubled over, his primary arm hanging at a useless angle. Zor let out a guttural hiss and signaled his 4 companions. They attacked simultaneously, utilizing a pack-hunting formation that had conquered dozens of worlds. Viven leaned into his screen, his jaw hanging open. He expected to see Maya Torres torn apart. Instead, he saw liquid violence. Maya moved like a ghost in the machine. She didn't trade blows, she erased balance. She used nerve strikes that bypassed chitinous armor, hitting the soft clusters of ganglia behind the Krellian's secondary knees. She moved with a terrifying economy of motion, her hands never straying more than a foot from her body. In 8 seconds, the hierarchy of the Federation was dismantled. One Krellian was down with a collapsed trachea, another clutched a shattered mandible. 2 more lay paralyzed on the ground, their nervous systems haywire from precise strikes to the spinal base. Maya ended the engagement by driving a palm strike into Zor's solar plexus, knocking the wind from his massive lungs and leaving him gasping in the dirt. The human didn't celebrate, she didn't even look at the fallen warriors. She immediately knelt back down beside Vec, her hands returning to the wound as if the interruption had never occurred. "Pressure maintained," she whispered, her voice a steady anchor in the storm of sirens. Viven sat in the silence of the control room, watching the medical teams finally breach the SciFi 7 bulkhead. He saw the Hectarian medics rush in, their 4 eyes wide as they surveyed the carnage. They found 5 of the galaxy's most feared warriors incapacitated, and 1 small human giving a professional, factual trauma report. "Patient is stabilized," Maya told the head medic. "Entry wound is packed. I've administered 3 milligrams of localized anesthetic. He's ready for transport." Later, in the quiet of the Academy's research archives, Viven began to dig into Earth's history. He had looked at their biology and seen prey. Now he looked at their culture. He found a term that hadn't been in the orientation briefing: the combat medic. He realized that on Earth, the people who were best at saving lives were often the ones most capable of taking them. They didn't separate the warrior from the healer. They fused them into a single, functional mandate of survival. He pulled up the video of the incident one more time. He watched Maya's face during the takedown. There was no anger there was no joy. There was only the chilling, focused application of a tool. She had neutralized the Krellians not because she hated them, but because they were an obstacle to her patient's survival. The medical report came across his desk an hour later. It noted that the injuries to the Krellians were surgically precise. Not a single strike had been fatal, but every one of them had been perfectly calculated to cause maximum incapacitation with minimum effort. Viven looked out the window at the training grounds. A group of Thorns was walking toward the mess hall, and for the first time they weren't looking at the ground. They were walking alongside the humans. The characteristic Krellian chittering laughter was absent. In its place was a heavy, thoughtful silence that seemed to stretch across the entire station. He thought about Maya's brown eyes. He wondered what other sequences she had stored in that quiet brain, waiting for the right malfunction to trigger them. The Academy logs would show a technical failure and a cadet's bravery, but Viven knew he had witnessed a paradigm shift. The galaxy was about to learn that soft was just another word for adaptable. The humans didn't carry weapons on the station because they didn't need to. They were the weapons. They carried their death world in their marrow, hidden behind polite smiles and medical kits. Viven reached for his terminal and began drafting a new recruitment protocol, his hands trembling slightly as he typed. The Krellian wing of the infirmary remained full for a week. Zor never returned to the combat simulations, opting instead for a quiet transfer to the Outer Rim cargo fleets. He didn't look at the humans when he left. In the training bay, the lights had been repaired. The obsidian floors were scrubbed clean of the blood and the dust. Maya Torres sat on a bench, her hair pulled back into its usual severe knot. She was holding a small silver pendant, an old earth relic of a red cross, and polishing it with a piece of soft cloth. A single orange peel sat on the bench beside her.